This episode of the Presbyterian and Reformed Churchman is a discussion I recorded with Ike Reeder, president of Birmingham Theological Seminary. Sadly, the day before Pastor Harry Reeder, Ike's father, went to be with the Lord. I held off on playing it because, out of respect for the family and because the tone of the discussion certainly didn't match the emotions we were all feeling. I have edited out some comments since, given Harry's passing on to glory, they were a bit irreverent, or at least they seemed to be. However, I do think it's important to make public this discussion because General Assembly is 2 short weeks away, and I want you all to stop by the BTS booth at General Assembly to learn about this great seminary, particularly for ruling elders and how this seminary can serve you in your ministry to the local church. BTS, Birmingham Theological Seminary, was very important to Harry Reeder, and the family has asked that in lieu of flowers, it says the family kindly requests that donations be made to the Harry Reeder Scholarship Fund at Birmingham Theological Seminary, as well as the Harry Reeder Memorial Fund at the National Christian Foundation or to Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. On this edition of the Presbyterian and Reformed Churchman, I have a friend, Ike Reeder. Ike is the president of Birmingham Theological Seminary, and the reason I have Ike on is because as we approach General Assembly, Ike's got some great offerings at BTS, Birmingham Theological Seminary, that are of interest to ruling elders. And I first heard this offering at the GRN conference, and I said, I got to have Ike on. So Ike, good to have you on again.
Great to be here, George. Always glad to be a guest in the George Sayer Funhouse.
It is the Funhouse, yes. All right, that's brownie points. Very good. Yeah, Darren Stone and I had Ike on our other podcast, Grace to Stand, but this one is geared toward ruling elders and teaching elders. Really, it's about being churchmen, being confessionally reformed in the PCA, and you have just a great. I keep wanting to say product. It's not a product program at BTS geared toward ruling elders. It's a certificate program. And so what I think I want to do is I'm going to play a segment of a talk you gave at the GRN conference just 2 weeks ago in Charlotte, where you were explaining BTS a little bit, but explaining this program that I've been talking about. And then we'll hear some comments from Dr. O. Palmer Robertson on this that is relevant both to BTS's history, but also to the certificate itself. And then we'll come back and we'll discuss that.
Yeah, unpaid comments, but let's make that clear.
That was phenomenal. See, I'm your biggest promoter. I'm trim this out for you, put it in the video because I'm a believer in BTS. I'm actually wearing my BTS swag, and I can't wait to go to General Assembly so I can get some more. What do you got? You got more?
We're on video, but I've got my I've got my BTS swag.
Wait, well, how do I get a bag like that?
I don't know, but that one I don't know if we have anymore. I'll have to work on that one for you.
Okay, all right. Let's not filibuster anymore. Let's go to this video. You gave this brief segment of a talk at the GRN conference about Birmingham Theological Seminary.
At this time, we're delighted to have our friend Ike Reeder come and tell us about the important ministry of Briarwood Theological Seminary.
Far be it from me to correct the esteemed Mel Duncan, but Birmingham Theological Seminary. So out of Briarwood Presbyterian Church. We are excited to be here, and that's an important distinction. It's wonderful. We are so excited to be here and supporting the GRN conference this year. But I do bring out the distinction because BTS, Birmingham Theological Seminary, was founded in 1972 as a partnership between two churches, Edgewood Presbyterian Church and Briarwood Presbyterian Church. And many of you will know the names of our two founders, Dr. Frank Barker, one of the founders of the PCA, and Dr. Bill Hay, who brought his congregation over from Edgewood to found Covenant Presbyterian in 1975, which is a wonderful church in the PCA as well there in Birmingham. BTS was founded to be a multi-denominational Reformed seminary that was accountable to the local church, but from the local church taught students from a variety of denominations, in particular working to provide avenues for students who had very little access to seminary education. Bivocational pastors, pastors with families, pastors who were second career calling, and the opportunity to go to our traditional residential seminaries was really not afforded to them. So at that time, in 1972, Dr. Barker and Dr. Hay founded Birmingham Theological Seminary with the goal of providing faithful, quality, reformed theological education that was accessible for learners everywhere, financially as well as through its delivery systems, to build leaders to serve the local church. That was the goal from 1972, and it's so exciting now, 51 years later, to say that we are still on that same mission and still doing that same ministry. Our everywhere, though, has expanded since 1972 from central Alabama to all around America and even all around the world, where we have over 30,000 students in a free certificate program that we run in partnership with Third Mill Ministries, many of you are familiar with them as well. So we are just incredibly honored to come here today to support the GRN and this conference, primarily because the GRN is not just for pastors, it's also for church members invested in the PCA, and in particular, ordained officers or those seeking ordination in the PCA as well. So while we serve the church through its leadership in vocational ministry, we also want to serve the church in its leadership through lay ministry. So there's two programs. We have the full suite of programs, from certificate programs all the way through doctoral programs, all of which are available both on-site in Birmingham, Huntsville, Montgomery, Demopolis, Tuscaloosa, and Dothan, Alabama, as well as the work we do at Bibb County Correctional Facility that we do there at the prison ministry. But all those programs are also available online via distance, utilizing digital technologies, live video conference classes, and even now a growing number of micro-learning centers around America where we send professors to teach weekly or weekend intensives so students can get live classes where they live, hosted by local churches with real-world seminary professors. These are real professors who are doing this with passion and commitment for Reformed theology. But there's two programs in my last minute here that I want to draw your attention to. For those that are pastors, I want you to be aware of our Doctor of Ministry program. We do have a wonderful program. It is entirely available online, but we work in cohorts. So students meet weekly with one another, digging into each other's lives with their time with one another, and really truly build relationships with one another. We have several men here who are in those cohorts who would be happy to talk to you about it if you wanted to ask them. We have 4 tracks in that program: pastoral leadership, biblical counseling, apologetics, as well as our new program in church multiplication and vitality that is built around the Lampstand Conference, as many of you are aware, which is the new iteration of Embers to a Flame that works around church vitality. That's a wonderful program. The whole thing comes in at less than $8,000 for students. So if you're interested in that, stop by our booth and talk to us. But the second one that we're very excited about is a program that we're launching this fall. It can be started this summer, but this fall particularly, which is a learning certificate geared towards leadership in the PCA. A PCA Leadership Certificate. It has 4 classes, has a class on the Westminster Standards, confession and the catechisms that serves as a survey of systematic theology, a class on Presbyterian Polity, a class on Introduction to Covenant Theology, and the 4th class is Conflict Resolution in the Local Church. We believe that these 4 classes will be an unbelievable resource for elder, deacon training, and for just lay people in the church who want to understand better what it means to be a Reformed Presbyterian individual. Every class at BTS that is at the graduate level is $100 per credit hour. So this whole certificate is $800 for 4 classes. Churches can sponsor students, or students can pay for themselves. We can host local micro-learning centers where professors can come teach these classes locally in churches if we have 5 or more students. Or students can be online with other elders and leaders in the PCA across the country, actually learning and growing together. So when they end up in presbytery together, guess what? They've been learning together. When they end up at the General Assembly together, They've been in class together. These are ruling elders that have this opportunity. So we're incredibly excited about our new PCA Leadership Certificate. If you're interested in hearing more, just grab us at the booth. We can't wait to tell you. Thanks for your time.
Well, Dr. Robertson, we are so glad that you are here. You should have heard the moan this morning when we announced that you weren't going to be here. It's a joy to have you here with your lovely wife, Joanna. He hardly needs introduction, but I do want to mention that he is, in case you do not know, a founding teaching elder of the PCA. And so as we think about the founding of the PCA and the values that we want to embrace and see going on to the next 50 years of the PCA, Palmer will be able to speak to these. And so Palmer, if you'll please come forward.
And what a wonderful assembly we have here. To hear about the seminary coming out of Birmingham, do you understand what's behind that? Do you understand? You have to go back, if you hang around long enough, you can become an eyewitness to history. And I'm an eyewitness to the fact that one of the things that led the old PCUS down the tubes was the seminaries. And the seminaries were all denominational seminaries. And it wasn't accidental that when the PCA started, we said, we're going to acknowledge all the different courts of the church. And so a court of the church can be a session. And a session is a proper court of the church to establish a seminary for the training of men for the gospel ministry. And so we have this seminary in Birmingham, and what a wonderful ministry it has had. I'm so excited, I think I'm going to sign up on this new program that you've got, this PCA Leadership Certificate. That just sounds absolutely wonderful. Let's pass the word around to that.
Okay, we're back. And so, those were some great off-the-cuff remarks by Dr. O. Palmer Robertson. What'd you think when he said that?
Well, I certainly wasn't expecting it. And although BTS has actually had a history with Dr. Robertson, we've partnered with him with his work in Uganda before. And Dr. James, our vice president, has taught some classes with him. But that was years ago. So his excitement over over what BTS is doing, not just in terms of the work that we're trying to do to get this level of quality and this level of academic discipleship into the hands of the local church, but also in the structure of BTS as well. I was just kind of blown away to get that great his perspective on it.
Yes, and I love. I mean, he's talking as a founder who was at the first General Assembly, who spoke at the first General Assembly, who remembers all that history. And so his perspective on the importance of seminaries having accountability was just it was really just a great fit within the whole GRN conference anyway. But why don't you give us a little brief history? You did a little bit on that video about Birmingham Theological Seminary, just some maybe distinctives of it, and the 51 years old. So you're as old as the PCA. I mean, the PCA is celebrating its 50th this year or so.
Yeah, we may have a T-shirt at GA that says like "Welcome to the 50 Club" or something like that. We're trying to figure out a good way that we can emphasize that at General Assembly this year. But 51 years old, founded in 1972. And if I can just reference, I think one of the things that Dr. Robertson was making a point of was in the importance of understanding the nature of the PCA itself as a grassroots organization, as a grassroots denomination. Obviously grateful for the wonderful seminaries that existed before its founding and their impact through, Reformed Theological Seminary and Westminster and others, at that time. But he's also referencing and recognizing the desire for local churches to step up and see a need and recognize how biblically and appropriately within the boundaries of what the responsibility of the church is to fill and meet that need. And that's really what happened in 1972 was Dr. Frank Barker and Dr. Bill Hay at the time in their work in the community, from their church into their community, because of their distinctions and because of their theological commitments, were working in environments where they were just with a lot of pastors. Some were pastors of different ethnicities, some were pastors in rural contexts who were not getting access to the level of quality of theological education that they thought, A, that those individuals needed, and B, that those individuals, many of them wanted, but just couldn't get to. Many of them were second career calling, bivocational, married with kids, or, just all those different things that are barriers of entry to a traditional residential seminary model. So they said, what we need is an open access seminary that holds the standards of the other seminaries, but creates avenues of success. We're going to think outside the box for what this is going to look like in getting this to the learners that really need it. And it's that sort of recognition that no matter where you are in school or any of those kinds of places, that you're only ever really able to get what you're trying to deliver to normally a very low percentage of the population that you're trying to get it to. So how do we grow that percentage and get it to a much wider, just cast that net wider? So that's when they started Birmingham Theological Seminary, and it has been running with that same mission and vision now for 51 years. So it's really been amazing. And then, of course, shortly after launching it as a joint project between two churches, it came under the supervision of Briarwood Presbyterian Church for theological, ethical, and fiscal accountability.
Yes.
And that developed that relationship as being a church-based seminary as well.
Okay. So I've been told I do a good job of interpreting the lingo that was used. So all that you just said, the way I describe it is flexibility.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? So,
Yeah.
Because when people say, well, what does that mean?
Accessibility.
There you go. Flexibility and accessibility. And I think in that little segment from the GRN conference, you really just highlighted all the different ways. I mean, you have obviously, online classes, and you have cohort-based classes, and you have residential classes, but you also have learning sites that are not out of Birmingham, but are wherever, and you have a number of those. And so, I can attest to the flexibility, and I've really enjoyed it. So I guess full disclosure, but I'm also a customer, right? So I'm,
but I'm also a client.
That's right. So I'm doing my Doctor of Ministry program with BTS because, and I have an awesome institution just right around the corner. RTS Charlotte is right there. And I was very tempted, and I love RTS, and I would have had, top notch, the best instructors in the world. I know that. Why I chose BTS was I liked the flexibility of it. I liked the cohort based model, so that I'm with the same, I'm 2 years into this, and I've been with the same group of 8 people for 2 years, and it's just been great to get to know them in that way. And the program, it's a Doctor of Ministry in Apologetics, which nobody else actually offers. And so, I think that's one of the cool things about BTS is you're nimble in that a need shows up and you're able to just do it. You execute on it. Like apologetics, you didn't even have a demon in apologetics 3 years ago, and you somebody in, I know one of the guys that suggested it to you, and you're like, okay, and then you went and you got professors to teach it.
Let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah. And I think the same thing with this leadership certificate for anybody, but for ruling elders, it's like, well, hey, you already have all these classes you're offering. Let's package it in such a way that we can help the church. Is that somehow how that came about?
Yeah, that's 100% correct, George. And if you look at our mission statement, you see the terms that you just talked through. BTS exists to provide faithful theological education that is accessible for learners everywhere, so that we can build leaders to serve the local church. That's the point of what we do. And the end part of that statement is the key component, which is that we serve the church. So when we see a need, one of our responsibilities is to try to develop a way that within the confines of being an academic institution, we can help serve the church. And I think one of the things that I don't think this would be a controversial statement for anyone in the PCA, is that while we have an upper tier echelon of ordained teaching elders in particular, and certainly some ruling elders that know and understand what it means to be Presbyterian and Reformed, we also know that we don't want to turn pulpits into lecture into lecture podiums. They need to be preaching lecterns where we're preaching biblical theology. Of course, Reformed and Presbyterian theology will be woven through that, but we've also got to do training. We've got to get elders prepared, deacons, and there's just people in the church that just want to learn more about what it means to be Presbyterian and Reformed. And we said, well, look, we do that for people that are going through the process of getting Master of Divinity degrees towards ordination. What if we carved out a small piece of that and made that available to learners everywhere so that they could have a short, concentrated, challenging, but also achievable program that can be beneficial to the local church? So that's when we started the Presbyterian Leadership Certificate. And we've taken 4 classes that we think are just, really encapsulate the fundamentals of Presbyterian theology, Presbyterian and Reformed theology. And that is our class on the Westminster Confession of Faith, which we utilize as a survey of systematic theology. We've taken the class on Presbyterian church polity, which works through what does it mean to be Presbyterian, the book of church order, all those major issues. We've taken our Old Testament and or our New Testament history and theology class, which is sort of our covert intro to covenant theology, because as a multi-denominational seminary, we've got students coming from a wide variety of backgrounds. And then we've taken our conflict resolution in the church class, which helps us seek to find biblical means of faithfully resolving conflict with love and compassion, but while committed to the truth. And we said, what church wouldn't like elders, deacons, and other members with those 4 classes under their belt? I mean, we can do that, and unlike other seminary models, we can do it at a cost that's reasonable for the average person who's not trying to go off and get an actual full graduate degree. So we've put this thing together. These are courses we've already been teaching, and we have now developed a variety of ways to deliver it. So we can deliver it through online programs where you're a student with other BTS student through video conference. We have correspondence version of these classes. A church could say, we want to put 5 people through this, and we're going to do it at our own pace together in our local community. Great. We'll get you all signed up for the correspondence. You can meet weekly, listen to the lectures, come together for discussion and dialogue. We may even have places like you referred to earlier where there's micro learning centers that have said, hey, once every 3 months, can you send us a professor? And we guarantee that we'll have 8 or 10 people in the room and do it Thursday, Friday, do it like a little learning conference. There is no end to the ways that we can help deliver this to the local church. And so that's what we did. We tried to be nimble and help meet a need in the PCA.
Yes. Okay. So as I hear that, and again, even the flexibility within the program, what I think the strength of this is, I would never want this to replace like elder training within the local church, because I think it's important for pastors and sessions to train people to join them as churchmen. But this is additional. It's and it's very kind of comprehensive when you see that sheet. And I assume, Mike, you can see what I have on the screen, right?
Yeah, I've got you. Absolutely.
Right. And so if people watch it on YouTube, they will see this. Otherwise, you're just listening. But again, 4 classes. Get this church leadership learning certificate. And the classes are the Westminster Confession of Faith. And I'll just read what it says. Westminster Confession of Faith class is an overview of systematic theology through the lens of the Westminster Confession of Faith and the Westminster Standards. And so I assume then that instructor will bring in the larger and shorter catechism as part of those things. Right. And then the next one's Presbyterian Church Polity. And I bet you this one is just really going to pique people's ears, because as much as people joke about the boringness of the BCO or whatever, everybody I know wishes they were better at
just understood it better.
Yeah.
church polity. And so this class is a study of the Book of Church Order, including a study of the biblical offices of the church, grassroots Presbyterianism, and Robert's Rules for Meetings. I mean, we all need that. And how many of us have been frustrated in meetings when both maybe in ourselves and not knowing how to proceed or what the right course of action is according to our polity, but also when others don't know that.
Let me jump in just real quick with that,
Yes.
one, George, just because I think you hit the nail on the head.
I try to.
Well,
I try to hit the nail right where it needs to get hit.
As long as my head's not the nail, you can keep doing it all day long. Basically our mindset on this is that people are probably going to come for these first two that we just talked about, but we hope they stay for the other two because they're also beneficial to the healthy life of the local church, right? And less people probably want to take conflict resolution, although many of us bemoan conflict resolution, than want to take a Westminster Confession class because we love diving into the theology stuff, right? But with the church polity class, the frustration is, look, Robert's rules are Robert's rules. I mean, we're going to go over those in that class, but the real issue is like, what have we actually laid down as the right and proper manner and order of dealing with individual, personal, sessional, and theological, issues and problems that are going to arise because we're sinful creatures. And so, there's been probably time after time that either people sitting in the pews in a congregation hear something about the order of operations that we're going through and go, that makes no sense. That sounds ridiculous. But the people that wrote these things, I mean, like historically and our modern version, like it's a deeply biblical text. And so that's really what we're trying to drive to is understand why we're doing this from a biblical perspective and therefore be able to know biblically how we're approaching these internal and external relationships that we have with one another. But the thing we're really excited about is the professor that we've got lined up to teach it live this fall is, I can make this announcement because he's agreed to teach it, is Reverend Fred Greco, who both is a former ruling elder who became a teaching elder and is the current chair of the Standing Judicial Commission and has a law degree. So he has a really unique background for understanding how we biblically understand, interpret, and utilize the BCO as Presbyterian. And he's going to be designing a universal syllabus for that class for us as he teaches it, so that we'll have other faculty that will be teaching it from that standard that we're really excited. Because we'll end up having 6, 7, 8 professors probably teaching this, but we'll have a universal standard that we're working directly with the denomination to make sure that there's clarity on its standards and what it's teaching. So I'm just super excited about that class in particular. And so I just wanted to jump in and say a comment on that one.
Yes. Well, okay. I didn't know if you were going to do the big reveal. So
the big reveal. It's out. The cat's out of the bag.
Yes. Fred Greco. That's awesome. And I would just say for all these classes, you've told me some of the lineups of the professors, and I know a lot of these guys. They're PCA pastors that are living this, doing it, teaching it, and it's a great lineup. I kind of like, oh, I want to take that class. I mean, I don't need to take a church polity class, but I'd like to sit in on,
Man, baby, that's what God made audits for. That was created on the 8th day. Auditing.
There you go. All right. Yes. Yeah. And so I do think that's a good point you brought up. So people might want to come in for those 2 classes and not stay for the next 2. I think anybody that wants to take these classes would want to get a certificate out of it. But I think the conflict.
Let me just say, sorry for interrupting. I'm hoping that people that just look at those 2 and like them will be so excited that they will stay for the other 2 classes. Yeah, and that's what I'm really hoping. Is that they'll keep moving forward because. Man, I learned, because listen, you can't get through Westminster Confession of Faith without getting excited about covenant theology,
That's right.
I hope they do get excited about covenant theology. And I think covenant theology is deeply misunderstood by most of our common lay people, in the church. And so give them a chance to go deep into what that means. And then, of course, after you take polity, having a biblical theology of conflict resolution to recognize how can we resolve the majority of our conflicts internally and personally through a biblical paradigm before we get up to a level of having to move to the church discipline, levels that we get to when we get into the polity side of it. I hope that those will just be deeply engaging and encouraging and exciting for not just ordained elders and ordained deacons, or those that feel potentially called and are in training, but even just the average, layperson in the pew that is deeply committed to God's word and to membership in the PCA.
Yes, and even as I read the explanation on the conflict resolution class, using biblical and systematic theology, this class examines the biblical understanding of conflict within the body of Christ, using peacemakers and other tools. It explores the necessary steps for biblical reconciliation in the church. And what it really does is it actually is like a capstone of the other classes, because the systematic theology is obviously the Westminster Standards, the biblical theology you're getting in the covenant theology class, and then our polity tells you how to do this in the context of the PCA. But here's some relational tools to be able to do that.
I would never have thought of it like that, but that is so
engineer, bro.
fun. That's the engineer mind, baby.
That's right.
So new principle. Here's the nimbleness. New principle. You can only take the conflict of resolution class last.
Yeah, I mean, but I think any elder that spent any time on a session would see the importance of that class, by the way, because some of the most discouraging, seemingly hopeless situations we deal with is conflict in the church.
Yeah.
And, we have a Savior that offers us hope, and he is a reconciler, and he's reconciling the world to himself, but he wants to see reconciliation in his church, and it's yet. So I think that's great. Also, you have BTS has a great counseling department. I don't know who's teaching that, but I actually took a class I didn't need to take while I was doing my DMin, just because I wanted an extra class and I wanted to learn from Dr. Irick. I mean, he's taught at multiple seminaries. He's written all these books. So it was a biblical counseling class that I took with you guys, and I was so enriched to learn directly from him, but to go through that material again, because I mean, I think you know me enough. I love the theology. I love the polity, but man, that conflict stuff and that counseling is so. It has the opportunity to be so discouraging, and yet that's where you see God work the most. So,
yeah.
I think that's the best way to say it. So this BTS has had multiple certificate programs. Is that right? Like, this is just a new addition to the already menu. I'm going to try to pull that up.
Yeah, it's under the academic page. If you click on that top button that says academics and scroll down, it's right below the academic mission statement with certificate programs. Yep. Just scroll down and you'll see them. That's it.
So you have certificate of leadership, certificate of teaching, certificate of apologetics, certificate of missions and evangelism, and one for worship ministry. And then, the leadership, Presbyterian leadership, I guess, would be that one. Mm-hmm. And so here's the menu.
And they're modifiable. I mean, that's one of the great things, is that a certificate really is designed for individuals, and you can certainly see there's a lot of similarity between the standard certificate of leadership. We already had we just pulled out leadership development and put in the polity class, and then made the conflict resolution one sort of permanent instead of intro to biblical counseling. But then we've got a certificate of teaching, we've got a certificate of apologetics, we've got a certificate of missions and evangelism. And the great thing about these classes, George, I think one of the important things to recognize for potential incoming lay learners, people who are going, I'm probably not interested in changing jobs right now, but I am a learner and I just want to be on a nice, steady learning track for myself. I mean, for most people like that, you're looking at $200 a semester. You get a great 12 to 14 week class. Yes, it's going to be challenging. Yes, you have to read a lot. Yes, you have to show up for class. Yes, you have to write papers. You got to do that stuff, but the reward is immeasurable beyond, what you've done, the work and the effort you've put into it. And so all of these classes, they're not unique to these certificate programs. These are all classes that are in our full master's level programs. whether it's Masters of Biblical Studies, the MA tracks, or our divinity program. So if you jump into a Westminster Confession of Faith class, you won't be in there by yourself. You'll be in there with counseling students and apologetics or public theology students or divinity students or, any different, cross-section of the BTS student body. And I think that's another advantage. A lot of institutions, when they want to provide offerings to the local community, that ends up being somewhat segregated away from the work that the actual graduate students are doing. And so there's no cross-pollination between those two. So graduate classes tend to remain full of people pursuing professional level degrees. But what are we pursuing professional level degrees for in seminary? It's to serve the church. So what better way to do it than learning where we can cross-pollinate with the lay individuals in the church? They will bring experience, perspective, and all kinds of things that the academic community generally doesn't have into the classroom with those folks that are pursuing the academic degrees. So I think it's a fantastic program, and the way I think we have 9 certificate graduates. We actually have our graduation is on Friday, and we've got around 20 graduates this year. And I think 7 or 8 of them are certificate graduates, and they're excited. They're pumped. About probably 50% are rolling on to another certificate. They're like, I want to do this certificate next or whatever. And so it's really exciting to see how God's using it.
Yes, and I don't think you said it in all that, but so if somebody wanted to go on, these classes would I would guess they would work toward their master's.
Yeah, so the way we've designed it is that 80% of the courses in all the so if you take that full degree checklist that we just had on there, the Presbyterian one, everything else, 80% of those courses are actually in our Masters of Biblical Studies program, which is basically our core. It's the core BTS program. It's a 40-hour, 20-class program. It's designed for the lay leader in the local church or to be the springboard into the MA or MDiv program. So it's a non-terminal degree that people can move up to higher levels. But really what we're focused on here is that you could do 4 or 5 certificates. By the time you've done 3 certificates, I mean, listen, you do 2 certificates and you're 50% of the way through the Masters of Biblical Studies program, So that's one thing we definitely are starting to see more of as we've launched these learning certificates over the last 3 years, is people get started there, get a taste for what this looks like, and then they get, there's a couple of classes we stick in there that aren't listed. Like, we're going to make you take Intro to Research and Writing. So we're going to help you learn how to write for grad school, learn how to write for theology, learn how to not put yourself in a corner through plagiarism. We're going to teach you those things. And certainly hermeneutics is another major one that's not in those certificates that we would have you take pretty early if you did multiple certificates. But all of that can be combined to take that next step to that attainable Masters of Biblical Studies. And the beautiful thing is, because we're a 2-hour system, everything at the graduate level is 2 hour, George. It is a simple math problem. If you're a lay leader in the church and you're like, I'd like to do the Masters of Biblical Studies, well, if you do 4 classes a year, which is a very doable pace for somebody even with a full-time job or a family or whatever, in 5 years you have a master's degree. And the whole thing would come in at $4,000 or less. So I mean that's a proposition. If you're a learner in the local church, there's no reason not to sign up. You got to start coming up with excuses not to be in that program, in my opinion.
Well, as I interview ruling elders on this podcast, I'm coming across more ruling elders that have master's degrees in biblical studies or some theological, because they want to. Because we're lifelong learners, like you said. Right. And I do think there is something, a lot of people love church Sunday school classes. And when they get into seminary classes, it's just so invigorating, because not only are you learning from, really qualified instructors, you're learning with other people that share your heart for the Lord and to learn, but then you're having to produce work, which, the best way to learn is to write on things and to study to to have to actually answer to certain things, and so yeah, man, I think
let me take that last statement, if you don't mind, just one quick step further. BTS institutionally, as I've said, you've heard me say this over and over again. We are a ministry-oriented seminary. Our primary work is to train people that will serve in the local church in ministry, whether it's lay or vocational ministry, right? That doesn't mean we don't have students that go on in the academy. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to hold the standards of the academy. But our number one goal is in the church. And so there is no class at BTS that somebody will take, especially at the graduate level, certainly in the D-Min program, because it's an applied degree anyway. But in the graduate program, this is something we talk about as the executive team. We talk about it in faculty meetings. We talk about it all the time. There is no class you will take that does not have a ministry application assessment component, because we roll on 3 different course sets of objectives that really they're just derived from Harry Reeder talking about leadership. So it's just, content, character, and competency. Like, all of our classes will have objectives that pertain to those 3 areas of leadership. So I tell people all the time when they're taking a class, the best way you can make this class exciting for you, other than just the intrinsic excitement of studying God's Word, is to use it while you're learning it. So, like, let's say you're doing that Westminster Confession of Faith class. Go to your local pastor and say, hey, sign me up to teach a Sunday school on the Westminster Confession of Faith. And what you're learning 2 weeks ago, that's what you're teaching the next Sunday during Sunday school. What you're learning here, teach here. In the covenant theology, it was in revamping our covenant theology class that I was like, man, I just need to put this in a Sunday school format, which I did. Now I'm teaching it for the 3rd time to a Sunday school community at Briarwood. And they're going, this is great. Like, we get pieces of this from the pulpit, but now we're getting this 10-week comprehensive version. And 3 people from that class are now rolling back and signing up for the covenant theology class at the seminary. So everything we do is going to be built for the person taking it to have ministerial application in their lives. Teaching, small group leadership, Bible study leadership, or mentorship.
And I've even found that in the doctoral program, because with all the reading we have to do and papers we have to produce, that work I've done over the last 2 years has become Wednesday night classes that I've taught, and all kinds of other. It's showed up in all kinds of other ways. It's affecting my preaching every week. It's amazing how the Lord.
Let's have a church book group on this book.
Well, you do all this work to write a 15-page paper, and suddenly that becomes the format of a 12-week class. I've done that more than once, and so definitely. Well, you're going to be at General Assembly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so I want people to visit the booth.
Would love it.
If they're interested in this. And I know, I couldn't believe it. One of my ruling elders just told me this week, he says, yeah, I signed up for that certificate program. And I'm like, really? You didn't even tell me? You just, bam. He heard you at Gospel Reformation Network, and he was interested in it. And so he is taking the Westminster Confession of Faith this summer. And he'll be taking, hopefully, the Polity one in the fall.
Yeah.
And so, so you'll be at General Assembly. They can see you at the booth. You'll have some freebies. What are you going to have at the booth?
Well,
like breath mints, or
we're still solidifying everything. But last year we had our little BTS bear that people could because we want GA to be a family affair, and we want to raise young BTSers. We don't have a football team like Auburn yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to start a seminary football league. But no, in all seriousness, we'd love for people to stop by the booth. We'll definitely have some cool little giveaways for kids and some T-shirts for adults and all that kind of stuff. But really, the main thing is we'll have phone chargers. So come sit at the you can plug in your phone. You don't have to go sit on the floor outside. If you don't want to talk, we won't bother you. No, we'll have a big end cap booth, and we'll have a lot of information there about this Presbyterian Leadership Certificate. especially, if you're a teaching elder and you listen to this, we'll have a lot of information about the 4 tracks in our doctoral program. We launch every fall with new cohorts in those programs. And then, of course, just the other stuff that we do and that we offer through the seminary. We'll have plenty of information on all those things. So, come get a T-shirt or a fun family gift and sit and talk about, being a learner in your local church. Right.
All right, so I'm going to give it to you here. It's going to be on the air, and so everybody's going to hear it.
Oh goodness!
I'm going to give you your marketing for this GA. You ready? The first PCA seminary.
I mean,
50th anniversary.
Yeah. I mean,
because even our denominational seminary had to come. They came in through joining and receiving. That's right.
Joining and receiving, and now it would be interesting to see what our good friends over at RTS's argument would be. Because they were started out of First Pres Jackson.
What year?
They were started. I think it was 1967. When they launched. And like us, they are a multi-denominational seminary, the Reformed multi-denominational seminary. But we would be the first one in terms of that actually is under a PCA church in that sense. So we could be the first one in that sense. Although I guarantee you that you just opened up a bag of PCA church historians that are going to go down the little known and little explored pathway of what constitutes an actual PCA seminary. So,
I know. Right. Well, but that goes to the grassroots nature of this and what Dr. Robertson said at the beginning of recognizing church court's ability to start institutions for training within their bounds. And I think that's probably part of the history. I think I've heard him speak on this of why, like when they came up with the uniform curriculum for the PCA and that education committee or commission, whatever it was in those early years, they stopped short of coming up with validated or approved seminaries for the denomination because they wanted it to be at the local level. Is that true? I mean,
I think as a matter of fact, that's actually, it's not a direct quote, but I think it's close to a quote from the BCO, which outlines the ordination requirements. And then the 1976, I think, Commission on Ordination and Ministry Training or whatever it was called, which then lays out in more detail the options for moving through ordination, and they do list a number of seminaries, and we were actually also listed as one of those in a secondary document recognizing the value of BTS even as early as 1976-78 timeframe. And but the argument in that document was, this is ultimately a local church and local presbytery responsibility. If the local presbytery chooses to say, we will build a learning plan for a man to move through for ordination, here's everything you need to know. You can do that. And that presbytery can, well within their boundaries, choose to ordain that individual if they meet the requirements of the uniform curriculum,
That's right.
So, I think you're exactly right. They didn't want to tie it. They didn't want the standard of what it means to be a pastor to be so intimately tied to an institution that the institution began to control the theological standards of what it meant to be a pastor.
Wow, that's good and well said. Well, Ike, I always enjoy conversation with you. You're interesting and fun to speak with. I do look forward to seeing you at GA. Please hold one of those bears for me because, my family doesn't come to GA with me and I have to come back with gifts. And so there's a freebie for me. Yeah.
Listen, we will get you. There is no chance you will not walk out of GA without a bear in your hands.
Nice. Very good.
We'll probably take that a number of ways, but we'll leave it at that.
I hear you. So to any of my friends at other seminaries, and when I guess I did just open a can of worms, but Fred Greco does call me a troublemaker. So I guess that's what he means.
And for my friends at other seminaries, notice I did not necessarily agree with his argument.
You could be the first.
We're older than the PCA.
You can. Yes. What you could have some great shirts, man. With some, you actually could cause a.
We could cause some ruckus, baby.
Yes, and that's what you want.
Disruptive. We're
right.
disruptive.
Decently and in order,
That's
ruckus.
Right. That's right.
Okay, I don't know, Ike. Is there anything else you want to share or say? I think we covered it.
Just you can, I mean, obviously you can get in touch with us through the website, but of course, I mean, listen, a friend of this podcast, you can always just email me directly at ike@bts.education. If you want, spell out the word education, because we don't have a relationship with the U.S. government. Neither do we want one. So, feel free to reach out if you've got more questions. And our booth was hopping last year, and I'd love it if we got a lot of great BTS folks that'll be representing the booth. And anybody, whether it's me, George, Reed, Noah, Dion, Jay, all the people we'll have there are going to be able to answer questions for you. So stop by and say hey.
So too bad we don't have a promo code for Presbyterian Church Presbyterian Reformed Church, but for the website.
I'll tell you what. Here's your big reveal with people at the end of the podcast.
What is it?
So I said this on a podcast I was on last week, and I will probably regret doing this.
Wow.
Let me first say that we, as you noticed,
so first, it's a Presbyterian Reformed Churchman first.
Yeah, that's right. You will notice that on the PDF little pamphlet that we have to hand out, the little postcard, it says church partnerships are available with options for moving forward. We certainly would love churches to come on and support BTS. But if any church, boy, this is probably a big mistake saying this on this podcast. If a church brings 8 students to do the Westminster Standards class this summer, BTS will sponsor the first class for them to get them started.
Wow, look at you.
Come on board. If you bring a full cohort, we'll get the class set up. We'll get the professor moving forward for you. And we can't do it for more than one. Our endowed fund is only so big. But then we'd ask, of course, that you would consider coming alongside us as a church partner for the benefits that you receive for the education. But if any church wants to if you bring 8 people together and they're all going to come and take it for an actual class, we'll sponsor your first round through. Because a lot of people go, look, I don't know anything about BTS. I don't know what your quality is. I don't know what your standards are. You know what? We'll prove it. We'll prove that we maintain the quality and the standards theologically, academically, and ministerially of any institution out there. So we'll put our money where our mouth is, and come on and sign up, and we'll get you taken care of.
Wow. I mean, did you, in that pause section there, did you go have a board meeting and get all that worked out? Look at you on the fly.
No, I did that on a podcast last week, but it was not a Presbyterian specific podcast. So I was like, I probably won't get, let's go for it. Like, let's get, now I'm doing it on a podcast that's going to be heard by at least 10 people in the PCA. So, that's a joke.
Wow, listen to that. That's like a, man.
Stay for the shade at the end, right?
You're supposed to be my friend. Okay. Well, everyone,
but you got to say you got to say you came from George's podcast.
Right. So, okay. Well, Ike, thanks again. I will see you at GA in just a few weeks. It's going to be great. 50th anniversary. We are looking forward to it.
Grateful to be here, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. And stay tuned for more pre-GA podcasts for everybody who's listening. I think we're going to look at upcoming overtures at a episode soon. Thanks again, Ike. This is my fun house.
Dude.